Welcome to another beautiful dev diary for Victoria 3, and today we'll be talking about buildings. Now, sorry, I'm a bit late. It's now already Friday, really late in the evening, but I didn't really have any time beforehand to actually get into the dev diary and start reading it, so hopefully it will be good enough of a wait to make it worthwhile for you and me both. Alright, so Victoria 3 Dev Diary number 3 Buildings. Hello again, everyone. It's Thursday again, and that means it's time to talk about buildings. Buildings are a core mechanic of Victoria 3, as it is where the pups work to produce resources such as goods. Buildings represent a wide range of industries, businesses, and government functions, from humble subsistence farms to complex motor industries and sprawling financial districts. In this dev diary, we're going to broadly cover the main types of building and their functions in Victoria 3. To talk about the buildings though, I first have to mention states. States are a concept that should be generally familiar to anyone who's played some of our other games such as Victoria 2 or Earths of Iron 4, a geographic unit of varying size in which much of Victoria's 3 gameplay takes place. States are where the pop lives, and more importantly, for a subject matter, where buildings are located and built. Alright, so we got the state of Gotland in Sweden. Let's see the information it's giving us here. We can see Gotland's in the Swedish market. The overview, we got a nice little picture that seems to be a woodland area with a lot of trees, cone trees? Is that like, is there a proper word? Pine trees? Coniferous trees? I don't know. A lot of that. We got the Swedish flag, the OG flags. So that's interesting to see they actually put the royal flag of Sweden in here. We got like a little shield with a blue ribbon over it, and we got what appears to be two small gears with PH over them. Maybe we'll get more details on what it is. And we finally have like a pickaxe and some ores. Yeah, sorry, it's my accent coming out. So a pickaxe and ore right here as it looks like a button. Maybe we can expand that to see what natural resources are available. And that is under the overview tab. We're in the Swedish market. We got a infrastructure, the usage of the infrastructure, most likely ore market access in that state, the GDP representation of our entire country, I suspect. In this case, it's 24.3% of Sweden, the taxation income, and the expense income. Now we got the important part, the buildings. First one here. I think that's I'm not sure, either a fort or like a town. I'm not sure. I can't really tell. This is a subsistent farm, so we'll go over that a bit later. But we got some factories here, a chair factory. We got some farms, some wheat and some cattle farms, and we got some ports here. It seems like a fishing port. That looks like a lumber yard right there, 2 points in. And we don't have anything developed for the yeah, I'm not sure if it's a raw resources extraction, or is it, do we need to gather the ore and then smelter them into bars, or do we get like directly iron bars from iron exploitation? I guess we'll see later. Probably getting directly the bars from the exploitation. So what's interesting here is in the state we have different type of RGOs rather than individual little section each having their own RGOs. It's just a very broad approach where I think it will be easier on the simulation than really assigning little parcel of the land with specific resources available. Right now it will be easier to simulate if you have a land split in two, then you get half the efficiency of whatever buildings you got on your own state part of the land. And then we got, looks like government buildings. So that seems like a government office. That might be the the fortification, and that's probably just like a naval base at level 1. We got some details on the population. The standard of living 9.2. The poor are struggling at 8. The middle class is middling at 16. And the rich high class is secure at 23. We got 192,000 peasants and 2 unemployed. That is beautiful numbers of unemployed. And the total population is at 809k with a growth of 8.46k. I don't know. Probably yearly growth will be more sensible for that amount of increase of population. Because I'm not sure if it's like a growth of over a year or over a month. Over a month, it would be a lot, like 1% growth a month. That sounds like a big number for growth. So I assume it's over a year. All right, let's see what text. So Mr. Wissington, yeah, it's still Wissington. It's Martin wrote about this screenshot. We will return to the States more in later dev diaries, but for now let's keep talking about buildings. Before we start on buildings, something that's important to note is that buildings are just a place where pups can work and generally do not represent a single building. A single level of government administration, for example, represents the necessary buildings and infrastructure to support a certain number of bureaucrats. Buildings always need qualified pups to work in them to yield any benefits. And an empty building is just that, empty and completely useless. This holds true even for buildings like railroads and ports that did not need pups to work in them in Victoria too. So, wait. The railroads and the ports in Victoria too? I don't think they needed pups. Unless I'm wrong, I don't think, like, you needed the pups to create and develop the resources you need to actually build it. But once it's started and you get a timer, 365 days, it's built and that's it. I don't think you needed population to keep them running, unless they're talking about like bureaucrats for admin efficiency. There might be an impact at that point. But yeah, I'm not convinced. That sounds a bit like a lie to me. But okay, we'll see. I kind of understand here because each level of units like this is not actually 2 piers for fishing ships. It's all the infrastructure and there's a certain level of abstraction coming with it. So it covers the fishing, the transportation of the fish toward like centralized markets, storage of the fish, everything in between. The pups will be working, and there's a layer of abstraction that fits it all, that a single unit of fish is able to generate fish that is available in the market. This is my understanding. For example, even the factory for chair, you don't actually just build a chair factory, you also build the warehouses, the administration building that are connects to it, and the population with the layer of abstraction. You still employ mostly craftspeople, but they will be working in that factory, but they will also fulfill all the little relevant jobs that need to be done for factory to be executing like it should be. The same thing for the farm here. You see, wheat farm, cattle farms. It's not just building a farm and people work. It's all the abstraction that comes with it, and this is like pretty obvious. I think. I don't know. Let me know if it. I think everybody could have assumed that, but I never know. Maybe I'm wrong. Most buildings are directly constructed, but some, like the subsistence building below, will appear automatically based on certain conditions. When buildings are the construction use pup labor and goods, the costs involved will be subject to the market forces, just like in Victoria too. We don't use pup labor, but we use the goods. So if you build a lot of railroads, then cement price goes up, steel price goes up, and it has an impact on your ability to actually build these railroads and forts and ports throughout every single state. So the more you want to build, the more money you need, because the cost will rise up if you try to all bankroll it in a single try. But on through the different building types. First out, we have subsistence buildings. These are special type of highly inefficient building that cannot manually be built or destroyed, but rather will appear anywhere in the world where there is arable land and that isn't being used by another type of building. The vast majority of the world's population starts in the game working in subsistence buildings as peasants. And much of the game industrialization process is about finding more productive employment for your peasants. So peasants eke out a meager living in these subsistence farms, contributing little to GDP and tax per capita. So we got a subsistence farm here in Gotland. Yearly productivity per employee, it seems like we're going down $0.9 a year. Employment 202,000 out of 260. Annual wages 1.15. Average annual wages probably for each one of them is 1.15, like 1K. That's my assumption. And weekly taxes is 1,872. So that is, wow, yeah, that's weird. I'm not sure like the how to consider that, but this is interesting because if we bring it back here, these are the subsistence building that we just covered. So as you expand and use that arable land to build farms or factories or any other like little setup that you have accessible here, maybe just, yeah, I'm not sure, I think we see this one later, but let's say like let's make it very simple. You got the arable land, you got a farm. The more farms you create and you build yourself, there are very high efficiency farms and very specialized. For example, they'll be treating about cattle, about wheat. They will make the actual product available to you to use throughout your nation or to trade on the world market. And they will take up, as you build them, take up some of the subsistence farms. So the subsistence farms are actually just like vacant land, but rather than having your pups sit around with their thumbs up their ass for 100 years, they're actually just working away in subsistence farms. So that's an interesting aspect. It's a layer of abstraction, but it's a good one. It's a good design, I think. Your pups are not just idling about. They still work. They still produce. They still consume. They still participate in the economy, but at a very reduced rate because they're not very efficient in what they're doing. And since the subsistence farm is everything from sewing clothes to making their own furniture to growing their own crops and taking care of their animals in small family farms, then there's not enough production to exceed the amount consumed by the population itself inside the subsistence farm. So the abstraction is that while they answer their own goods and need at a certain proportion, they don't generate much wealth and they don't generate much taxes for income for you as the states as a result, and they're not worth much for the GDP. So very interesting take with these subsistence farms. And this is the other one. Yeah, it's the urban center. Another special type of building is urban centers. Like subsistence building, these are automatically created rather than built, with the level of urban center in the state being tied to the amount of urbanization generated by its older buildings. Urban centers primarily employ shopkeepers and provide a number of important local functions that we will get into at a later point. The urban center is where you'll find most of your middle class shopkeepers. So we got urban center. This is similar to the subsistence farm, but rather than living on subsistence and answering their own needs and requirements, sorry about that, they actually agglomerate into urban centers, and that elevates the standard of living of these people, so they generate more GDP, more wealth, but it's still a very abstract level of mechanic that just rather than being a vacant land, Like in this year, rather than being 26 vacant land, maybe you'll eventually get one urban center. It's not necessarily that they want to be very highly defining that urban center, because that's not that important in the scope of the game, but just a representation that your people went from being subsistence farmers to actually being able to produce more goods, being able to insert their needs and others pops needs, and they are able to agglomerate into a pops center, a urban center, sorry, and from there they can probably build these different type of factories or government buildings, because it's a more middle class that is part of that urban life. Very interesting. I really like the approach with Subsistence Farm and Urban Center. Let's take a quick look. We went through the Subsistence Farm, so we got Urban Center's Villand. Yearly production is 8.6 income, so that's very good. 10,000 people employed. The cash reserve is 50K. The average annual wage almost 5 times higher. Weekly taxes is lower, but there's less total population. In production method, we got like shopkeepers. That is either what I think it looks like some sort of edict that you can assign to like estates, urban centers, and this will be like gas lighting and like local transportation for the population inside the urban centers. You won't be able to set up tram railroads or install light posts inside the city, but probably with these options, like probably toggleable options, that's what I have the impression, will increase the standard of living of your population in the urban center. I'll wait for more definition in these options, because just toggle buttons I don't think is a great mechanic, but at the same time is very abstract what we have up to now. Next up, we have the government buildings. These are buildings that are fully funded by the states. An example, you, and provide crucial civil services required for the smooth running of a Victorian nation. Examples include government administration, where bureaucrats produce bureaucracy for the administration of incorporated states, and funding of institutions. And universities, where academic produce innovation for technological progress. All right, so right here, important element to seize up the government buildings. We have different type of government buildings. We got the government administration that will generate the brokerage juice that we saw last week, that will be able to enact like road maintenance with that. Is it bureaucracy or it's the ruler authority for the road maintenance? I already forgot. This is how much I was not paying attention to the game for the last week. I was completely wrapped up in my real work, so excuse me about that. I don't think it was bureaucracy, but whatever bureaucracy was covering last week when we were talking about not mana, this is like directly tied into the government administration buildings, where the bureaucrats can produce that juice in a very abstract layered way. The funding of institutions is interesting, because like universities are where the academics will produce innovation for technological progression. This is very interesting, because we will produce innovation and then there will be technological progression. So this is really that we will eventually give it a dev diary that will go deep dive into the different mechanics for the technology, that I'm for sure. But it seems like we got a sort of manical innovation that juice ups what you can go for technical progression. And I actually I did a suggestion for the game to go a little bit like V1, Victoria 1, in the way the technology works. If you have ever played Victoria 1, the fashion these technology are deployed is actually quite simple. Depending on the academy you choose, you have up to 5 different technologies. And out of these 5, they're the same kind of technology as Victoria 2. In fact, they're the same technology as Victoria 2. But the 5 choice will be one for industry, land unit, naval units, whatever else you have, like economy and philosophy, I think. you'll get one technology of each. But if you have a academia that's different than the standard intelligence academia, let's say you got a military, industrial military complex, then you'll get two choices for industry and two choices for army, land army, and then one choices out of the five other. So while there's some random generation chance for the technology, you still have some control over, you can manipulate the main direction your country is going. What I really preferred about that technique rather than what we got in Victoria 2 is that in Victoria 2 it became very obvious very soon when you start working that there are technologies that are so far superior to all the other choices that not taking them is almost shooting yourself in the foot. Right? If you don't rush the three technologies you need for colonization before 1890 turns around, you'll be left behind. You'll not be able to colonize Africa. But at the same time, if you don't go and research, for example, the prestige technology and your maybe the Ottomans or Austria, it's possible you lose your great power status just because these technology are critical to keep you in good standing in the world with your prestige. So losing that prestige too soon by not actually developing these technology and getting the bonus, the share, the bonus ASAP, makes it that you can actually lose your standing, start losing your sphere of influence, and it can all go downhill if you're playing, for example, the Ottomans. It's just stepping out of the great power. You start losing grip on all the neighboring countries that are not so friendly to you. Uh, so I'm pretty far away from talking about the buildings here, but really interesting. I'll wait for more details. Seriously, this is pretty much every single dev diary up to now. We'll wait for more details on the next great feature. Hopefully it will be next week. I'm quite interested in technological. The bureaucrats work in the government administration to provide a bureaucracy, the lifeblood of the government. We got government administration building. Oh yeah, this is this one, right? Yeah, that's the government administration building. It's getting so late. I'm so sorry. So we got 20K employees, average annual wages, weekly taxes. Government expands because we get a fund that government station. We got production method. So we're creating some bureaucrat juice, I guess. Is that looks like some sort of hierarchy symbol to me, like, but I'm not sure exactly what the two is. Maybe the technologies will actually come and offer different type of production method that will be more or less expensive or better at producing like the broca juice that you need. But really, this is weird. I'm not sure I can find myself a way to explain what that is. The process, we got throughput plus 6%. It could be related to that, maybe 3% per level of whatever that is. And for the expense, we're minus 4.76K. And we are producing 42 letters with a cost associated to that. Okay, that's the total expense. All right, I understand. So we're producing 42 letters with 1.3K cost. And the wages, 3.41K a week, gives us a weekly bureaucracy of plus 21. Interesting. So the counterpart to the government building is private industries. The vast majority of buildings in Victoria 3 fall under this category, which includes a broad range of industries such as non-subsistence farms, plantation, mines, and factories. Unlike the government buildings, private industries are not owned by the states but rather by the pop, such as capitalists and aristocrats, who reaps the profits they bring in and pay wages to the other pups working there. Usually, at least under certain economic system, the ownership of the building may be radically different. Here they're probably suggesting that the nation that have a communist or even potentially a fascist government in power could definitely change who owns the different building, right? Under communists, capitalists, and aristocrats would theoretically not be existent class of pups. So these will be probably owned by bureaucrats because that's communist for you. All right, many of these buildings are limited by locally available resources such as arable land for agriculture and simply how much iron is available in the states for iron mines. Urban buildings such as factories, however, are only limited by how many people you can cram into a state, simulating the more densely populated natures of cities. In short, there is no system for building slots or anything like that, as we want limitations on building to function in a sensible and realistic way. This is great because one of the downside of Victoria 2 was you had a limit of 8 uh, factories per state. And for example, if you have you're the UK and you got London and maybe a small island Pacific eventually becomes a state, you could build 8 factories in both of them, but definitely in London there's way more chance that you fill up all these factories and you start expanding these factories and they become just bigger and bigger. Meanwhile, the states in the Pacific, you probably will not even build 8 different factories in them. You'll maybe build 1 or 2 just to say, and then the population will never be sufficient to fill it up. Alright, so we get several type of private industries shown below. So we got a furniture factory level 3 here because the urban center size 1. We got a couple of resources. We got a pier for fish, a lumberjack yard, and an iron mine. And we got agriculture with 26 unused arable land. We got a maximum of 27 possible farm for cattle and wheat. And this is because there's 26 empty spot left. So we can go up to 27 of either. Or if you put 13 in each, then 13 in each, you'd get 14 out of both of them. Finally, there are development buildings. These are often, but not always, government buildings that distinguish themselves by providing vital state-level function. A couple of examples are barracks that build and train soldiers from the local population, and railways that provide infrastructure other buildings need to bring their goods to the market. From left to right, you got barracks, ports, naval bases, and railway. Oh, see, these are actually the development building. Interesting. So yeah, with the barracks, you'll be able to form a population to become military units. Naval base will be the same, I guess, for ships. Maybe bound to a limit of ships you can have. That will be sensible choice. And we got the port. The port will definitely be more of an economic transporty option, and then naval bases. I'm not sure if that's the naval bases. This is more like for training officers and seamen to to maneuver ships around the sea. So the more you have, the more ships you'll be able to christen and sail on the high seas. That is my assumption here. And we finally got the railway, which allows us to transport goods and population inside the states. To finish up this dev diary, I just want to mention that building up your country is meant to be a more hands-on experience than Victoria 3. Great news. Because in Victoria 2, building up your country for railway, naval base, and port was just setting up the map on naval base and control clicking every single state 3 times. That was just horrifying, man. It was not a good experience. It wasn't like something enjoyable, even for the factories, right? If you went for a planned economy in Victoria 2, and if you had a small state, let's say Bavaria, and you become a planned economy, it's fine. You got like 3 states. So you can manage that. But if you're playing Russia and you become the Soviet Union, forget about that. Planned economy is just madness. You get like 50 states you gotta personally manage up. This is just crazy. Alright. This will be absolutely core to the society building aspect of the game and form a major part of the game core loop. Great. I find that interesting. I like building buildings. I like building trains too. So. This naturally also means that we need to give the player the necessary tools to manage their building in a large empire. Exactly what I just it's all about with planned economy in Russia, and it's not fun. Which may involve some form of autonomous building construction. Though we haven't yet nailed down exactly what form that will take and whether it will involve decision making on the part of the investor class. Ultimately, though, we want the player, not the AI, to be the one primarily in charge of the building of their own country. Well, there you have it. There is of course a lot in here, such as production methods, that will receive further explanation in the many more dev diaries we have planned. So be sure to tune in next week as I talk about goods. See you then. Tonight will be interesting to talk about the goods in Victoria 2. It's in Victoria 3. It's one of the better part of Victoria 2, the markets and everything. You generate the goods. It's like one part that's missing in all other Paradox games, right? In Paradox, you kind of have some resources. Earth of Iron 4, you kind of have resources. But there's nothing to the same level as Victoria 2. With Victoria 2, you really manage your resources, right? The creation, the expense, the consumption of the resources is a core gaming loop of how you experience the game. You make more coal for your factories to employ them. You develop technologies for your coal so you can have more efficient factories. It's the entire idea of the game of industrialization, all based on the goods. Meanwhile, all other games don't really get the same impact of goods. Like Europe Universalis for good is just not a good design. You get goods all over the place, but all they do is if you get them all, it gives you a bonus that changes nothing to your game probably. Unless you're hunting for a specific achievement with Norway, you freak. Alright, but there's a lot to unpack here, but I think we did a good walk around, and actually it's dragging on time, and this has been the longest dev diary up to now. But hopefully you've enjoyed this crazy rambling from a man. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more, because we're gonna get a lot more to talk about. So this has been Joe. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.